So our next presenter is Courtney Cameron, and Courtney worked on a project with Rochelle Sturdivant, Ashley Elgin, Lindsay Chatterton, and Alicia Davidson. Hi, Courtney. We can see your slides and you. Welcome.
Hi. Hi, everybody. As Mary mentioned, my name is Courtney Cameron, and I'm a recent graduate from San Francisco State University with a master's in marine biology. And the project that I worked on this summer was titled GLANSIS Impact Assessment and Profile Development. Sorry, my slides are not moving. Okay, here we go. So what is GLANSIS? So the acronym GLANSIS stands for the Great Lakes Aquatic Non-Indigenous Species Information System. It is a NOAA-led interagency project that functions as a one-stop shop for information on aquatic non-Indigenous species in the Laurentian Great Lakes. It also functions as a Great Lakes specific node of the USGS Non-Indigenous Aquatic Species Database, or NAS. And finally, it strives to provide the best information to limit the introduction, spread, and impact of ANS in the Great Lakes by providing a comprehensive set of tools. One of the features that GLANSIS provides is an interface for accessing Great Lakes specific content using a simple search engine. You can search for things like by lake, type of organism, species name, common name, status, type of introduction, etc. In addition, GLANSIS currently contains fact sheets or profiles for over 180 non-native species that have established within the basin. These fact sheets include photos, distribution maps, information to aid identification of collected organisms, details about their native range, mode of introduction, history of invasion, and realized and potential impacts of introduction, as well as additional information about their biology and ecology. So what did I do this summer? What I did was added reptiles of interest, specifically requested by Great Lakes state agencies and management and the Nature Conservancy, determining if those species qualified for the watch list or list of established species on GLANSIS. The reptiles of interest that I work on include red-eared sliders, yellow-bellied sliders, river cooters, alligator snapping turtles, Chinese softshell turtles, and eastern mud turtles. With those, I developed profiles or fact sheets for each of the species added to the watch list or established species list. This involved extensive literature search and a review of relevant information regarding the life habits, such as reproductive potential, competitive ability, trophic impacts, etc. of ANS species. I also completed risk and impact assessments for each of the species and evaluated if they're likely to become established in the Great Lakes. I updated species occurrence maps, and finally added relevant literature resources to the database for future users by species. In order to complete the profiles, GLANSIS has a standard protocol used to evaluate species for the watch list or established list that is summarized by the flow chart. I'm not going to delve into each detail of this figure, but I will summarize it into a few points. So first, we determine if the species is exotic to the Great Lakes and can be found within the Great Lakes Basin. We evaluate potential or realized pathways of introduction, such as dispersal or unauthorized human introductions, for example. We determine if species have the potential to overwinter or reproduce based on abiotic factors and spread, or if they are already overwintering and reproducing in the Great Lakes. And finally, we research potential or realized ecological, socioeconomic, or beneficial impacts of the species in the Great Lakes. And in the next few slides, I will summarize the profiles that I worked on using this methodology and list some of the impacts these species could have on invaded systems, including in the Great Lakes. So the first profile that I worked on was the red-eared slider. The red-eared slider is a commercially valuable species in the pet trade and is recognized as the most sought-after pet turtle in the world. It is endemic to some Midwestern and Southeastern states, and approximately 52 million individuals have been distributed around the globe, and it has been established on every continent except Antarctica. In general, it is an aquatic omnivorous generalist, which periodically leaves the water to bask, find mates, and forage for food. This species can also live in a large range of aquatic habitats with varying nutrient levels and salinities. And in the Great Lakes specifically, the red-eared slider is reproducing and overwintering in the basins of Lake Michigan, Lake Erie, and Lake Ontario, but are not found in the Great Lakes proper. Reproduction has been reported and confirmed in Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, New York, Ohio, Ontario, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. The impacts of the species have been widely researched, and many studies suggest that this species aggressively competes with native turtles for food, basking sites, preferred habitats, and mates, putting some species at risk of extinction. In addition, red-eared sliders are also frequently raised in poor conditions, leading to widespread disease and parasite infections. In turn, turtles that are reared in captivity and subsequently released into nature have a high likelihood of spreading pathogens and parasites to wild native turtles in the Great Lakes. They have also been highly associated with salmonella in humans, and in terms of beneficial impacts, they are commercially and recreationally valuable and have been useful in human medicinal studies regarding cerebral strokes and heart attacks. The next species that I worked on was the yellow-bellied slider. And as the sister subspecies of the red-eared slider, the yellow-bellied slider has a similar profile and is also popular in the pet trade. Tia scripta is highly adaptable and can tolerate anything from brackish waters to man-made canals, lakes, rivers, wetlands, and city park ponds. It is similar to the red-eared slider with its opportunistic diet, broad physiological tolerance to various abiotic factors such as salinity, temperature, and eutrophication. However, there are no reports of overwintering or reproducing populations of Tia scripta in any of the water bodies connected to the Great Lakes. However, a few citizen science records place individuals of this species in connected water bodies within the basin. It has a moderate probability of establishment and is likely to have similar impacts to the red-eared slider, though more research on the species in its introduced range is needed to confirm this. River cooters are plant eaters that spend most of their time in the water, rarely entering land except when basking or nesting. These turtles are cautious animals and will flee into the water column if slightly disturbed. This species naturally occurs from Maryland to northern Florida, west to eastern Texas, Oklahoma, and Kansas, and north through the southern part of Missouri, Illinois, and Indiana. It has been introduced to the Great Lakes Basin, but no formal records show that it is established and overwintering there. It has a moderate probability of establishment in the Great Lakes if introduced and will be placed on the watch list. And in terms of potential impacts, little research suggests that Pseudomys consona will act as a vector for virulent diseases or parasites in its invaded range or outcompete native species in the Great Lakes. However, river cooters are known to host blood flukes and herpesviruses, but no reports of transference to native species have been recorded in the literature. In addition to being commercially valuable as a pet or for food, the river cooter could serve as a possible biocontrol agent for introduced or watch list macrophyte species in the Great Lakes, as it has displayed a preference for invasive plant species on the watch list, such as Egeria densa and Vallisneria americana. One of my favorite profiles to work on was the alligator snapping turtle. As you can see, it is an enormous carnivorous turtle that primarily inhabits the deep waters of rivers, swamps, and lakes. In the 1960s and 1970s, it was heavily exploited for its meat, especially in the southeastern United States. However, the commercial harvest of the species has closed as stable native populations have declined or have been extirpated. In some states, the purchase, acquisition, and possession of this species is illegal due to its status as a threatened species across its native range. So even if it's introduced, it is unlikely that the species will be able to successfully reproduce and overwinter in the Great Lakes Basin due to cooler temperatures. Although its northernmost distribution is western Illinois, which would have similar seasonality to the basin, ecological niche models suggest that low soil temperatures in the Great Lakes are likely to inhibit successful embryonic development during the incubation period. And one of the more notable impacts that the alligator snapping turtle has on human health is that it is able to bite off small appendages when handled inappropriately or not handled well by humans. I also worked on the Chinese softshell, which is a small to medium-sized aquatic turtle that primarily consumes animal matter and is endemic to Eastern Asia. It is widely cultivated with multiple introductions for human consumption, and by some cultures, it is a delicacy. It is established in Hawaii, the Philippines, and in Spain, and risk assessment scoring predicts that P. sinensis is unlikely to become established in the Great Lakes due to natural predators. Past research suggests that approximately 76 to 100% of their eggs are destroyed by natural predators in their native range. And some of these predators include dogs, foxes, wild boars, aquatic birds, and crows, all of which can be found in the Great Lakes Basin. In areas where it is introduced, it has the potential to affect native populations through disease, though more research is needed on the species regarding its effect via other ecological effects, including its potential for competition, predation, and hybridization. And finally, the last species I worked on was the eastern mud turtle. They are small omnivorous species that prefer a shallow, highly vegetated environment. They are semi-aquatic and will often venture into land to burrow. Currently, there are no known reproducing populations of this species outside of its native range. However, small natural populations of Casebrubrum occur in Northwest Indiana and New York, which experience similar seasonality and air temperatures to the Great Lakes. There have been multiple introductions in the Great Lakes, and it has a moderate potential for establishment due to the similarity in climate. Potential environmental impacts that this species could have in introduced areas include the fact that it is a known host of parasites, chiggers, and rhinoviruses. And for all of these species that I talked about, common vectors of introduction include unauthorized intentional releases by pet owners who no longer want turtles when they lose their charismatic coloration as they age, or they are unaware of the time commitment as turtles live for decades. For example, most of the turtles I mentioned can live up to at least 40. Sometimes these turtles are also released through religious rituals, such as prayer releases. And then finally, they can escape from captivity from garden ponds. Common ecological strategies leading to their success include high reproductive potential, such as high fecundity and clutch frequency, high competitive ability, such as aggressive behaviors that place the invader at an advantage over native species, broad physiological tolerance to varying abiotic factors, such as the ability to overwinter in cold and anoxic environments in the Great Lakes, and opportunistic foraging, having a broad, flexible diet. Common ways that managers deal with these invaders are using intensive trapping and netting, such as baited hoop net traps, basking traps, and pitfall traps. Authors also suggest that managers should use trained dogs to locate species terrestrially, eDNA techniques as they develop, and monitoring cameras in order to enhance removal. And moving forward with this project, all of my profiles that I worked on are undergoing the review process by USGS and external reviewers. After that review process, the profiles will be posted on GLANSIS, and the GLANSIS team will continue this work and add amphibians and other species of interest to the database through other students and volunteers. And finally, I want to encourage those interested in researching the impacts of invasive species to continue your work, or for those interested to pursue it, as more research is always needed to better understand the implications of invasive species introductions in important systems such as the Great Lakes. I wanted to thank my mentors for teaching me the ropes of GLANSIS and talking to me about their career paths, the GLANSIS team, Ellen Austin, the Sigler Glurl Fellowship Program, Mary and Michelle for hosting the program, and of course, the Sigler Fellows. Thank you. And if there are any questions, feel free to ask.
Thank you so much, Courtney. Wonderful job. I love all those turtle pictures. I'm a huge turtle fan. Does anyone have any questions for Courtney? We have a few minutes. Feel free to raise up your hand if it's quicker than typing in the chat. Okay, I don't see anything. Oh, Casey, let me unmute you. Oh, Casey, I think you can unmute yourself. There you go.
It looks like I can. Thanks, Courtney, for that really interesting presentation. Are there any predators in the Great Lakes landscape or ecosystem that might, might predate on some of these turtles at some stage?
Yes, so one of the more common predators that I've read about is the raccoon. The raccoons tend to devastate nests that are available to them, and I know that there are tons of raccoons around the Great Lakes area, so that's one major one. Crows are also a big predator, foxes, small mammals, but they all tend to eat turtles when they are incubating in their eggs.
Thank you.
Thanks, Casey. We have another question for you in the chat, Courtney, from Teresa Delic. Are many turtles released via prayer release? So it sounds like Teresa is a little interested in that practice, and how much do you know about the frequency or how big of a problem that is?
Right. So I don't know, I can't give you any numbers in terms of frequency, but it seems to be a common practice amongst some religions, and at times people can release like hundreds of individuals at a time. So that's pretty severe and concerning.
Wow, thank you. I also, that's a new concept to me. I've never heard of that either. So thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, oh, let's see. Teresa also asked, are there turtles at a state where they are destroying the environment?
So the reason why at the end of my presentation I sort of had a call for additional research on the effects of invasive species is because these turtles are a lot of times understudied in terms of the impacts that they have specifically on the Great Lakes. And so we actually don't know, like in the case of the red-eared slider, for example, there aren't a lot of papers on that. And so if anybody's interested in studying that, that would be great.
Thanks, Courtney.